In the winter of 1925, in the small, quiet little town of Saint-Michel-des-Saints, an assassination took place that shook the region, but is largely forgotten almost 100 years later. This is a classic story of greed, corruption, low-speed car chases, high court drama, and above all, murder. Previously, the Maguire brothers had just been apprehended and interrogated for the murder of James Robert Stuart Tyhurst. News of the murder spread far and wide and brought an enormous amount of people to witness this trial. Once the initial investigation was complete, the preliminary trial started on December 14, 1925. Never in the history of Joliet had a trial brought out so many people to witness it. There were farmers, voyageurs, lumberjacks, and an extraordinary number of women filled the courthouse beyond its capacity. On the first day of the trial, there was a blizzard raging outside the courthouse. There were so many people witnessing the trial that they began to complain about the heat, and some were starting to feel faint from the intensifying body odor that filled the room. At 4 p.m., one of the lawyers requested a brief 10-minute recess just to air out the room. Throughout most of the trial, the Maguire brothers seemed somewhat nervous, but mostly unfazed by the proceedings, and seemed confident that they would be found innocent of the murder of James Robert Stuart Tyhurst. Despite the harsh weather of the season, the town of Joliet was becoming overrun with people coming to witness the trial. The hotels were quickly filled to capacity, and people were forced to find places to stay in neighboring villages. Charon spoke about Tyhurst and how he found the body. Dr. Charpentier told the story about the state Tyhurst was in, and then how he and Ducereau pursued the killers using Ducereau's McLaughlin Buick. He testified that when he caught up to the car that the Maguire brothers were trying to get out of the ditch, he strongly believed that they were the killers. This was confirmed when he noticed the shotgun in the back of the Maguire's car. Judge Dubois concluded that there was sufficient evidence presented to justify a subsequent trial, set for October 1926. While the brothers seemed to accept this decision calmly, their families and friends were overcome with grief. The Maguire brothers continued to be in good spirits. They waved and smiled at their friends in the courtroom and seemed completely confident in the outcome of their trial. Over the course of the trial, over 100 witnesses were called to testify. Mr. Blais stated that Tyhurst quickly suspected that the Maguire brothers were involved in the conspiracy to steal the logs from the St. Maurice Paper Company and consequently conspired to murder him. Over the next few days, witnesses described the murder scene, the type of weapon used. Witnesses from surrounding areas reported seeing a car that was similar to the Maguire car speeding through their towns and villages. At one point, the judge requested to see the murder scene with his own eyes. And although the lawyers protested, the judge insisted, so the entire jury, the lawyers, the accused, were loaded into a bus and taken to Saint-Michel-des-Saints, where they visited Tyhurst's house, including the office where he was murdered. Due to the bad road conditions, they didn't get back to Joliet until 2 a.m. The next day, the trial started at 10 a.m. Ducereau arrived late to the trial at 11:45 a.m. When the judge questioned as to why he was so late, Ducereau stated that he only woke up at 11:30 a.m., but he was ready to testify now. However, Ducereau's testimony only frustrated the judge, the jury, and the lawyers. He often answered questions with, "I don't remember." He stated that the night of the murder, he was too intoxicated to remember exactly what had happened. He wasn't even sure he had pursued the murderers in his car because he was so drunk that he couldn't believe he would even take that chance. And when he did answer the questions, his answers were different from what he told investigators back in December 1925. "I don't remember," was all he could say. The following Monday, the judge declared that Ducereau was to be considered a hostile witness. The rest of his testimony only served to exasperate the Crown prosecutors. He declared that he fabricated an alibi for the Maguire brothers and told them to say that another car had passed them while they were in a ditch. During the cross-examination from the prosecutors, Ducereau stated that the car tracks did stop at the McGuire brothers' car and that there were no other tracks visible. When René McGuire, the brother of Edward and Patrick, took the stand, he stated that he had lost a large contract with the company due to accusations of corruption by not measuring the logs correctly. Because his brother, Edward, was one of the measurers, he convinced Edward to take full responsibility for the theft. René and Edward met with Tyhurst and signed a legal confession to this effect. Edward lost his employment on that day, but René managed to get his contract reinstated. The accused listened carefully to René's testimony, and they seemed concerned. When René was recalled to the stand, he admitted that although the brothers had been out of work for a month, Tyhurst had promoted Edward to the position of company electrician. When questioned why he would do this a month after Edward had signed his confession, Tyhurst assured them that this transgression had been forgotten and that they could all rest easy. Several more witnesses could not be found during the time of trial. It was rumored that a woman was seen walking through the towns with large sums of money, bribing witnesses not to show up to court. The judge found this to be strange and stated that once the witnesses were found, they were to be held until their time to appear in court. By October 20th, the lawyers for both sides began to make their closing arguments to the jury. Mr. Oscar Gagnon, the lawyer for the accused, stated that the Crown had failed to make their case against his clients. He stated that there were too many contradictions, too many coincidences, and simply not enough motive for either of the McGuire brothers to end the life of James Robert Stuart Tyhurst. The McGuire brothers were respected members of their society, family men, and this type of violence was not in their characters or their reputation. On October 21st, Mr. Philippe Blais, the lawyer for the Crown, encouraged the jury to focus on the known facts of the case and not be distracted by phantom cars, unreliable witnesses, and unprovable secret conversations. The brothers were known criminals, having engaged in corruption, exposed by Tyhurst, and consequently fired by the company. There were no other cars on the road that night, and the tire tracks ended where the McGuire brothers lost control of their vehicle. The shotgun in their car matched the murder weapon. They had motive, opportunity, and the methods to commit this crime. During the closing testimony that afternoon, Edward wept while his brother sat next to him stoically. Once Mr. Philippe Blais concluded his closing argument, the judge turned to the jury and stated that he expected a verdict by the next day, Friday. That Friday, the courthouse was packed beyond capacity, with over 600 people crowding the courtroom and lining the halls awaiting verdict. At 10 a.m., the jury entered the courtroom and took their seats. The foreperson stood up and declared that the McGuire brothers were not guilty. The courtroom erupted with cries of joy and jubilation. The judge thanked the jury for their good work and turned to the McGuire brothers and told them that they were free to go. In tears of relief, the McGuire brothers joined their families at the Joliet Hotel for a meal and an evening of celebration. To this day, the person or persons responsible for the murder of James Robert Stuart Tyhurst, the superintendent of the St. Maurice Paper Company, have never been found. My name is John David Hickey, and on behalf of ECOL, I want to thank you for joining us on this mysterious and murderous tour of the streets of Lanaudière. And until next time, put on the kettle and make some tea. And if they didn't live happy, ayez.